Good evening. The 757th meeting of the City of Laurel Historic District Commission will come to order. If you wish to be heard at this meeting and are not an applicant, please sign the speaker list provided on the table in front of the room. The qualifications of the members of the commission, the staff to the commission, and any consultants used are on file with the city and are hereby made a part of each and every application heard today. The guidelines and procedures adopted by the commission are also made a part of each and every application. Each application heard today is considered on its own merits and is not to be considered as establishing a precedent for any other application. Madam Secretary, will you call the roll?
Chairwoman Blitz.
Here.
Mr. McSaney.
Here.
Councilman Les. Mr. Clacoon.
Here.
Mr. DiLorenzo. Mr. Dyer.
Here.
Mr. Hayes.
Here.
And we do have a quorum.
Thank you. The first order of business is the approval of the minutes for the July 17th, 2012 meeting. Are there any questions or corrections to the minutes?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
Madam Secretary, I have a motion on the floor to approve the minutes for the July 17th meeting made by Mr. Clacoon, seconded by Mr. Hayes. Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Clacoon.
Yes.
Mr. Hayes.
Yes.
Mr. McSaney.
Yes.
Mr. Dyer.
Yes.
Chairwoman Blitz.
Yes.
And the motion carries.
Thank you. Agenda item 3 is HGC 002-2013 for 606 Montgomery Street. Is there anybody? Oh, hello. You can come have a seat right here. And you're Denise
Kubishek.
Nice to meet you. And you want to tell us about your project? You're going to be replacing a door?
Right, we're going to replace the front door. The wind blows through it. It's not very secure. Just want to put a new door in.
Okay. And you're going to use this three-quarter light door system?
Correct. Without the side lights, just the door
Okay.
itself.
And without the mullion at the top?
Right, right.
And the opening's going to remain the same size as what's currently?
Correct.
It's a nice door. Any other questions?
Any question? Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to for passage of HDC 002-2013 to replace the front door with a new three-quarter light door, factory finished in medium oak.
I'll second it.
Madam Secretary, I have a motion on the floor to approve HDC 002-2013 as presented, made by Mr. Hayes and seconded by Mr. Dyer. Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Hayes.
Yes.
Mr. Dyer.
Yes.
Mr. McSaney.
Yes.
Mr. Clacoon.
Yes.
Chairwoman Blitz.
Yes.
And the motion carries.
Okay, very good. Thank you for coming in. Agenda item 4 is HDC 005-2013 for 358 Main Street. Hello.
Hello.
You're Monica Price?
Yes.
Nice to meet you. I'm glad to see you on Main Street.
Oh, thank you. We're glad to be there. It's very nice. And we're just missing our sign.
Yes. Let me get to the page where we can see it. It's going to be a white background with blue letters. So it's basically the same size as the sign that was there before.
Is the sign going to be lit?
No.
Because looks like there's lighting underneath of,
You know, lights came with the building. They come on at night. So I guess we can just leave them there.
okay.
I can't remember. I'm right across the street from there, and I can't remember if I see them lit up at night or not. Are they?
Sometimes they are.
Okay, that's probably why I don't. It's Mr. Massini.
I was wondering, rather than just have squared corners, whether or not at least painted, there'd be some cutouts or something to make it look a little less modern?
I could check with the company that's gonna design, you know.
Like some
put it
half
up there.
moons on each corner, half moon on each corner.
Okay.
Cut out.
You can see that on almost all the signs on Main Street.
A little fancy.
It's like a little line that goes around it, and then it has a curve in the corners.
Okay,
It's just decorative, but it offsets the sign nicely.
okay.
Also, the image we have, it looks like the lettering is blue, I guess, with black outline, but somewhere it says actual color sample, it looks like it's all black. Is it going to be blue and black or just black,
You know, I think it's gonna be black.
you think?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, my son presented this, so
Oh,
yeah. Is black, would that be a problem?
Yeah, black, no, black is fine.
Okay,
Black is fine.
it does
Okay.
state that in
Okay,
the
so it's going to be
description,
black.
that it will
They
be white with
originally
black.
thought they would do it blue, but then they changed it to black.
okay.
Okay. And in the image we have here, the established in 1971, is that going to be visible from the street, you think?
Well, the lettering is smaller than the...
It's a lot smaller, yeah.
Yeah,
But, I mean, I don't have any objections to it, I just thought I'd point that out.
yeah. I guess when you're walking by, you can read it better than...
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Madam Chairman, I would move that we approve HD 005, 2013 for the sign as presented, except that the lettering will be all black, and that they will change the cornering, at least the painting of the cornering, as we discussed.
If you have any questions, Simon can help you with that.
Okay.
I'll second that motion.
Madam Secretary, I have a motion on the floor to approve HGC 005213 as stated by Mr. Mazzini and seconded by Mr. Cookloon. Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Mazzini?
Yes.
Mr. Cocoon?
Yes.
Mr. Dyer?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Chairwoman Blitz?
Yes.
And the motion carries.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 5 is HGC 0062013 for 373 Main Street. Yes, sir.
Madam Chairman, I'm on the Board of Directors of the Historical Society, and so I'm going to recluse myself from this item.
Okay.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Karen Lubinecki, and I'm here on behalf of the Laurel Historical Society. We have a grant from Anacostia Heritage Trails for a small Civil War project, and actually next year, our major exhibit is going to be on the Civil War in Laurel, which we're very excited about. But as part of the grant, we've been researching and identified the location of a building that was actually used as a Civil War hospital in Laurel from January through November of 1863. And we thought it would be appropriate to mark that site on the city because people are interested in important things that have happened in buildings. And we have contacted the owner of the building, Mrs. Gatto, and she is more than willing to let us put a plaque on her building. Actually, she already has a small plaque, a historical plaque on her building. We anticipate that this sign would be on probably for about a year, not necessarily permanently, hopefully permanently, but this is an aluminum sign, so it's not, we don't have the money to do one of the brass ones, as though they're like $300, and we don't have that kind of money. But we thought for at least the year that the exhibit was here, that we would be able to recognize that. And by the way, I think technically we're going to be at the corner of 377 Main, and Mrs. Gatto owns the whole property, so it's 373, 70. So, and I think you have a copy of the proposed sign in your packet.
Yes, it's very nice.
Thank you.
Karen, would this be in lieu of the current plaque or in
No, this
addition
would
to?
be in addition to.
Right, so it's on the side of the building.
It is on it will definitely be on the side of the building, yes.
That's really interesting.
We're finding a lot of very interesting information about what happened, particularly with the railroad, as we're doing our research. If you join the Historical Society's Facebook page, we share some of those new insights as we find them. But yeah, we're finding some very interesting things that I think people didn't know about that happened here, so
Absolutely.
it'll be
Good
very
job.
good.
Any other questions or comments?
No.
Madam Chair, I move approval of HTC 0062013 as presented.
I'll second that motion.
Madam Secretary, I have a motion on the floor to approve HDC 0062013 as presented, made by Mr. Dyer and seconded by Mr. Clickloon. Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Dyer?
Yes.
Mr. Cocoon?
Yes.
Mr. DiLorenzo?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Chairwoman Blitz?
Yes.
And the motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Agenda item 6 is HGC 0132013 for 411 4th Street.
Hi,
You're Suzanne.
Susanna Peasler, yes.
Nice to meet you. You're going to be installing a deck.
Yes,
Would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
sure. We currently have a small landing in the back that we would like to remove and put in a larger deck, a composite decking material for just the decking, and then we wanted to do actually a cedar for the handrail system. And then we also wanted to do a stone pathway, two stone pathways in the side yard and then also in the back of the property to replace broken concrete pathways that are currently there. And then there is also, the way that the previous edition was put on, there were 2 entrances on the back of the property, and both had, very small landings, and so the side landing, we would like to replace those materials to match the new deck.
Will it be in the same size?
Yes, I don't know that we were allowed to make it any bigger, although we would prefer to have it a little bit more generous for going in and out.
The side landing
Sure.
closest to Carroll Avenue? Mm-hmm. Okay. And then the deck is highlighted in yellow?
Yes.
Okay.
And the dashed line is the previous landing that was there.
You're not actually removing any plantings, you're just moving to
There's nothing,
myrtles.
yeah, there's no plantings in that whole back area right now, in the back of the yard. And then the 2 large crepe myrtles are just from other parts of the property that have maybe a lot of plantings in, the front yard, and then there's hardly any in the backyard. And then we will add some additional small plantings in those planting beds.
And given your request that the deck be made out of Trex,
Sure.
is there any particular reason why you're selecting cedar for the railings and the post?
Well, we didn't care for the appearance of the Trex handrail systems, and we weren't sure that we wanted to deal with painted handrail systems and the maintenance involved in that, and we just thought that a stained cedar would look good for a long time, and it's much easier to do staining touch-ups than scraping paint and repainting. So.
Okay.
The only thing that might be a little different than the packet that you have is, instead of doing the concrete pavers, we were hoping to do flagstone instead. Process if you need it.
Everybody see that?
Yep.
Let's look at this. Decking material. Anybody else?
You don't have, so the square cobblestone, you're not going to do that?
No, the Bellegarde cobblestone, we are not.
Okay. And you're just going to do regular,
Flagstone.
okay, in concrete?
No, these will actually be actual flagstone on stone dust. And so there is no need for a concrete base for it. It's actually better for water issues too.
Let's see.
And the Trek is going to be the cedar color?
No,
what I'm
the
looking at?
Trex decking is actually gonna just be in a gray, kind of to blend
Oh.
in a little bit with, we didn't really want to do a composite brown and then have the stain of the cedar, so we kind of wanted to have a variety of materials to make it.
So that's going to be the stain of the railings?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so that would be,
It's a very light toner, actually, that I think has a slight tint to it.
So it's going to be the gravel path, right? I have a number of them.
Yes, that's the
circled.
color of
Okay.
the Trex.
where was that?
Right, right.
Oh, okay.
That's shrubbery all around there.
Any more questions? I'd like to make a motion that we approve HDC 013-2013 with the gray gravel path Trek with the cedar rail and the flagstone path as presented.
I'll second it.
Madam Secretary, I have a motion on the floor to approve HGC 0132013 as stated by Mr. Cocoon, seconded by Mr. Dyer. Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Cocoon?
Yes.
Mr. Dyer?
Yes.
Mr. McSeany?
Yes.
Mr. DiLorenzo?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Chairwoman Blitz?
Yes.
And the motion carries.
Thank you for coming in. Agenda item 7 is HGC 0142013 for 609 Prince George Street. Hello,
Hello, good evening.
Greg Schweitzer.
Yes, ma'am.
How are you?
Good. I would like to replace the wooden windows in my home with historically accurate vinyl windows. The 2/2 panel as they are now, Captain Green, as you see, I don't know if you have a photograph, but Captain Green as the same ones are right now. And under the job specifications with Power Home Remodeling, I've asked that all sashes and vertical grids are to keep with historical accuracy of the home. And I'm going to do 17 windows,
Is that all the windows?
all except one.
Mr. McSeany?
Are the current windows original windows?
Some are and some aren't. If you look at the photograph, if you look to the left, in 1991, we put the addition onto the home. Two of those windows are newer, installed then, and they also match the historical accuracy of the home. And they're going to be,
But they're still original, the windows that are there,
yes, there are.
so all the
Yes.
windows are original.
Except for the ones that were installed except for two of them that were installed with the addition, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they are. It's a correct statement, yes.
Have you looked into repairing the windows as necessary or restoring the windows?
Well, I have storm windows over the wooden windows now, and I've had the home examined. I'm losing a lot of heat and a lot of air conditioning, and energy. I've asked several contractors, and I haven't found any of them that would recommend a newer type of wooden window.
These are window salesmen that you've talked with?
Some are and some aren't, yes, sir. But we're going to great lengths to match what we have right now with the 2/2 and cap them in green as they are right now.
Do you have a sample of the window?
Yes, sir. Well, I have a,
I mean, no, I don't mean, not a description. Do you have a sample window? I mean, you're buying this from somebody that manufactures them? Do they have samples that we could look at?
what they gave me was a grid pattern here of a window.
Yeah,
I don't have a
sure.
photograph of the window.
I don't want, I'm not asking for a photograph. I'd like to be able to see an example, a sample of a physical window if you have. Many people,
I'm sure I can go and get you one. I don't have one
okay.
tonight, but I feel comfortable that Power Home Remodeling is going to do a good job with it.
Your windows have lasted probably 100 years already, or close to it. I hate to see original fabric, especially windows, in a very nice home, replaced with modern replacement windows. Many of us in the preservation community say that replacement windows are called replacement windows because they don't last very long. I mean, if you get 20 years out of a replacement window, you're doing pretty well.
I'm pretty much assured this is a lifetime warranty that will also go and transfer over to the next owner, whenever that is.
Well, I'd like to see a sample of the window. I mean, I believe what you say, but I'd like to see it.
When was the work to begin?
October, the first part of October.
And Sonny, we wouldn't have another meeting till the end of October, or
16th.
16th?
Could we have one on the first Tuesday? If it was just for you and for one item?
I mean, I think that's your call to do the first Tuesday.
And we could, but
Do you know the brand name of the window? Anderson? Or?
Other than Power Home Remodeling, and let me look. SL 700, 2700 style, it's triple insulated with gas, with full screen, as I have now also, capped in green and matching historical accuracy.
Are they going to be replacement windows or the whole window? In other words, are you going to use the existing window frame?
Yes.
You are.
Yeah, they're just going to pull the window out and stick the new one in. So we'll still have the edge around.
And then they're going to cap the wood outside.
Right. In the same green that we have now. It's going to be the 2/2 as it is.
Have you gotten any prices to do the woodwork around the window to maintain that instead of capping in aluminum? Or, yeah, I guess that's what they would cap it in, wouldn't it?
I haven't, no, I don't have those. I don't know how much that would add to the price of the job.
yes, sir.
Madam Chairman, I move that we defer a decision on this pending being able to look at the material that he's going to use to replace it with.
Yes.
In general, recommendations are to maintain the historic material whenever possible as a general historic preservation guideline. And if you're going to be replacing windows, then although you're saying match the historic I believe your word was accuracy or something like that. It helps to know the specific dimensions so that your contractor is indeed,
The dimensions as far as what?
the muntin is the vertical divider between the panes of glass. Are you talking about true divided lights, meaning there would be 4 panes of glass
Yes.
per window, or
Two.
2 on the top?
Just
two,
as it is now.
Or separate panes of glass?
Yeah.
This is not one pane of glass with a,
It's well, it's just like it is here. It'll come down the middle as it does here and have a 2 over 2.
okay, so it's not a snap-in grill or a grill sandwich between panes of glass. It's separate panes of glass.
No, it's inside the glass.
It's inside the
Yes.
glass. So it is indeed one pane of glass in the top sash and one pane of glass in the bottom sash.
With the piece in the, yes, inside of it.
That's between the panes of glass.
Yes.
So on the outside, the reflectivity is such that if you were looking at it at an angle, the light would, you'd see it as one
Well-
pane of glass in the top half and one pane of glass in the bottom half. Because that
Depends,
will
I guess
change
that depends
the,
on who views it, but there's gonna be a screen up there also.
a full screen over it. Okay.
There's gonna be a full screen over it also.
I
As
think-
there is now, there's also now, presently, a full storm window over it.
Right, but storm windows in general, through Secretary of the Interior standards, general historic preservation guidelines are actually beneficial to protect the historic material so that the wood that has been there for 100 years has been protected by your storm window. But the original material is still there intact. So I think where Mr. McSaney was heading was that he would want to know that indeed the proportions and the articulation of the material, the way it is trimmed out, would indeed closely match. We can't, I think, Mr. McSaney, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but I think where you're headed is you wanted to make sure that the trim outline was consistent with the trim outline there, that the dimensions of that muntin, which is the bar down the middle, would be consistent, that the perimeter of the sash itself would be the same proportions, because when you change materials, then sometimes it changes dimension. Sometimes the vinyl can be more bulky than the wood, sometimes not, but it can be. And so that too can change the appearance of the building if those proportions are not consistent. So in general, if your windows are being ordered from names mentioned were Anderson or Pello or any manufacturer, they will have not only the sheet that your contractor gave you, but they'll also have some details. And even if they don't, your window salesman probably could get you an entire window, but that would be bulky to carry in. But he could at least give you samples of the dimensions and the proportions of the sash themselves, as well as the muntin, which is the divider, vertical divider between the sash on your windows now.
And Mr. Schweitzer, just so you know, our guidelines here do not forbid your vinyl window. They are discouraged, but they are not forbidden.
Okay.
So that is
Well,
up to you.
My mother was born and raised on Prince George Street. My father's family's from Montgomery Street. Who, you know, I've been here for 51 years, so I don't want to go, you know, I'm a friend of the town, so whatever you want to do. I mean, I'm already under contract with them, so,
Are they single pane windows that you have now?
yes.
Yeah.
Or if we don't have a second to the motion to table.
Would it be a problem to push them off a week or two? Or
I guess not. I mean, I can call them, you know, and do that, if, you know, if that's required, and trying to get either a photograph or a window in here.
Preferably a window.
Okay. I'll see if I can do that, or whatever
Okay.
you want me to do.
I'll second that.
Madam Secretary, I have a motion on the floor to table. HDC 0142013, made by Mr. McSeany, seconded by Mr. Cookman. Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. McSeany?
Yes.
Mr. Buckhoon?
Yes.
Mr. DiLorenzo? Mr. Dyer?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Chairwoman Blitz?
Yes.
And the motion carries.
And what's the date that I do that?
Do you want to do,
I just soon do it as soon as we can. I mean, if, you know, we're here to serve the citizens.
You're trying for a meeting first Tuesday, or?
First Tuesday of October?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. That's October 2nd.
Okay.
If they can't save the wood frame, you know, the wood outside, even with the replacement window, I understand what you're trying to do with,
The wood itself is gonna, I believe is gonna stay, and they're gonna just go.
cap it.
Right.
But the rest of the house is wood, isn't it?
I'm sorry, the rest of the house.
The siding on the house
So it's
is?
vinyl.
Vinyl, yeah.
Oh, that's vinyl.
Yeah, it's all vinyl.
Okay.
It's that way when I'm doing it, so. Okay.
thank you. Agenda item 8 will be a courtesy presentation of the C Street Flats project, presented by Mark Mullen. But before we do that, Mr. Manzi, would you like to go over what the overlay?
Sure, I can give you a little history on the project. Excuse me. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Historic District Commission. I guess it was better than 2 years ago, the police department actually moved out, or was planning to move out of this property, and we were able to obtain a substitute police department, as I'm sure you're well aware of. At that time, the mayor sent out a request for proposals to try to get development of the and/or redevelopment of this piece of property. If you'll remember, this was at one time a Safeway store. If you look at the building, it still has the round roof of many Safeway stores that exist in Prince George's County, which are being used for other purposes at this time. And that building has existed on the property, to my knowledge, since the early 50s, early to mid 50s, when Safeway operated there. We being the city, received a number of interests, and subsequent to that, we entered into a contract with the Klingbeil Company, which is here before you tonight with a set of plans. However, those plans are really the city's plans, because the city still owns the property and will continue to own the property until all the conditions precedent to the, as required under the contract, are met, and then the title will transfer. But as of now, it's still city property, which is why we're before you. The other thing is that this is an overlay, and an overlay is not really a zoning case. It's an alternate development tool, which is allowed in specific cases where the city council finds that there are significant public benefit features, which they have already found in approval of a concept plan. Carl, I think that's where we stand right now, is concept plan approval, right? That's correct. So we have not gone beyond that, but the city council has had that in front of them and has approved that as it stands now. So we have an approved conceptual plan by the city council with conditions, and there will be further approvals necessary by not only the city council but also the planning commission. And therefore, this is before you to try to get input from you. We want, certainly the mayor wants, and the city council wants, the input of the Historic District Commission, but it's not really a matter of approval or disapproval. It's a matter of input and your recommendations, so that we can take those into account while this project moves forward. This is really the very, I would say that on a 100% we're at about 25% right now as far as the approvals go, because there are many more hoops that we have to jump through. One I'll discuss with you, and that is there's this strange thing that we found when we did the title search. There's actually an alley that goes down. It is not a public alley, and it's not really an alley, but it's shown in all the deeds of the properties that come from Main Street all the way down to the river, including the city property. So we have just recently gotten the owners together, and all the owners, including the city, have agreed that we're going to do quitclaim deeds back and forth to do away with this alley up to where Mr. Mills' property is, and there actually is an alley there that serves as access to the public alley behind the businesses along Main Street. But the remainder of the alley, which is the St. John and trying to think who the other owners are. St. Paul, that's right. And Crew. We're going to go ahead and abandon that so that it's really funny. It's one of the craziest things I've seen. It's in the deeds. It doesn't appear anywhere else, meaning it's not on any approved plans, but in the deeds, there are rights of each party to utilize the rear 10-foot of their neighbor's property for this 20-foot alley that goes all the way down to the river. So that's been one of the challenges in dealing with this property, is to get that taken care of. And early on in the property, one of our problems was Safeway stores had a right that they felt they still had to approve any development of the property. Because in the deed that they submitted to the city in 1971, they did reserve to themselves that right. But we've convinced them that that is not appropriate in a case where you've had municipal ownership of this property for as long as we've had it. And again, as I said, the reason we're here is to try to get the input of the Historic District Commission so that the council and the Planning Commission, et cetera, and of course planning staff can take that into account when we while we're taking a look at these plans and approving or disapproving or amending the plans. So I hope that gives you background. I'll be happy to give you anything else. I know that as I said, we're not really that far along in the planning process yet. There are a number of other hurdles that we have to go through, both county hurdles with stormwater management and a number of other things that have to be taken care of, including these alleys, before we can go much further, because we can't deliver clear title right now. So, yeah, very interesting piece of property. Very interesting piece of property. A lot of crazy history with regard to from Safeway till now. A lot of crazy history with that. As you know, the building has been added on to and subtracted from by the police department over the years with a sally port. There were other additions to the building that were added on to the back portion of the building during those period of years. Some of them exist, some of them do not exist anymore. I've seen plans that were, at one time we had, there was a storage area behind, and then that became the sally port ultimately. So there have been a lot of changes with regard to that building. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. That's where we are in the process.
Okay. Thank you. Carl, do you have anything you'd like to say before he starts?
Mr. Manzia mentioned, just so you understand, like in one of the fundamental differences of an overlay is that we basically, trade is the wrong word, but we allow density subject to amenities. So each project we've done in an overlay has distinctive site amenities. This one obviously is taking a distressed property, that's an amenity. But there are two other distinct things that's very important in this particular project, and that is the applicant, we're working with the applicant on an amount or a project that'll be added to our capital improvements program to create a natural amphitheater on the northeastern side of this property, which will enhance one of the entrances to the park. That's one. And two is the construction of, and this is something you'll be involved with, of a black ornamental iron banner somewhere near the corner of C and Main Street, because one thing the applicant's done is work very carefully with LADEC, as you might have heard them, the Laurel Arts and Entertainment District Committee, which I'm actually a part of as well, trying to get theirs, because they've been very interested, obviously, in that. So among the space and the fact that this property is unique in that it has a finite amount, I don't want to take Mr. Mullins' presentation time away, but it has commercial space that can be used, but anything on this property to facilitate the growth of the Arts and Entertainment District can be used for an artist's studio or shop or thing, provided they're not a sculptor and using a blast furnace or something like that, can be accommodated in this building. But we wanted to have a visual demarcation of the Arts and Entertainment District, which we plan on expanding eventually. And those are the two big site amenities that right now that they're doing. The amount to be negotiated is yet to be, that'll be done, as Mr. Manzi said, in the final plan that goes before the Planning Commission. We're not quite sure that date has not been set yet. So, with that, I probably tramped on Mr. Mullins' presentation, so I'll keep quiet.
Well, would you like to come on up, Mr. Mullen, and start your presentation?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, Mark Mullen with Cleanville Capital Management. Pleasure to be before you this evening. Jim Keller, the president of our firm, is here. He's sitting to my left. Here with his lovely wife, Kathy. I just thought I could introduce him to you. Thank you very much. What you have before you, you should have some elevations and followed by a site plan in the back, and I'll just take you through this. What you see really is the product of, as Bob Manzi mentioned and Carl mentioned, we've been working on this project for close to 2 years and taken a lot of community input, and we've worked very hard with our architect to try and get what you see before you to really reflect the historic character of the site relative to Main Street. And so the first elevation that you have in front of you shows the property from the C Street side. If you were looking at it from the gallery and the Venus Theater, of course they're not pictured there. That park's just for perspective purposes. But what you have there before you really is, we just to give you some sense of where we started with a flat roof line, and we got community input that said, you know, soften that, give us some peaks, try to tie out to Main Street. Give us some more brick. Originally, we started out with just a brick skirt around the bottom, and you know, get soften a little more. Give us a little more brick. And then one of the other things you'll see down at the bottom, Riverstone. Probably hard to see. I apologize for the size of the rendering, but we tried to tie out to the use of Riverstone throughout the community, and that's another item. The window lines, originally we started out with window lines that were much more industrial. These window lines are closer to what you might see with respect to Revere Bank, and it's a bit of a happy medium between a kind of a stark industrial look and a more historic feel. Now granted, it's new construction, so it's going to be very tough to get to that really historic feel, but we want to let you know that we've made a good faith effort to try and get there. And then as you go down, you see the awnings, the green awnings there, and the commercial space. And as Carl just touched on a moment ago, although briefly, that space, our intention is to turn that over to the arts community and let them pretty much have use that as gallery space with some amenity in there, perhaps a coffee shop, wine bar, something along those lines, but effectively turn it over to the arts community to run and present their work to the community. And the thinking is that we'll have some bump outs there along the streetscape so that it's inviting to the pedestrians from Main Street to come down, have a cup of coffee, a glass of wine, enjoy the streetscape, enliven the streetscape, and energize that area of the neighborhood. But overall, as you may have heard, our goal really is to bring people downtown to historic Main Street, get them out of their apartments, get them away from their cars, get them so that they want to stay in the neighborhood, walk in the neighborhood, spend their money in the neighborhood at the restaurants, the shops, and so on, and try to give Main Street that shot in the arm that's going to, get the ball rolling so that all of Main Street gets enlivened. And our hope is that the people that live here, many of them will access public transit, which, as you know, the train station is very close. So those are really our goals. And if you turn to the next elevation, which is simply the look from B Street, it's not a lot different than what you've seen on C Street, with the exception of there's no commercial space along that street frontage. And then, lastly, just to reiterate what Carl mentioned, anyone in the artist community that wants to come because of the overlay aspect of this can rent a unit and can use it for their purposes, assuming that it's conducive to the residential nature of the overall development. So with that, I would open it to questions, and happy to try and answer whatever questions you may have.
What we're seeing, is that what's proposed right now, or you say 25%? Could it change, or what's the likelihood that it's going to change? The appearance.
The appearance we hope will not change at all. Of course, subject to feedback, and we, as mentioned, we're going to have to go before the Planning Commission to discuss materials and colors and the like. But our hope is that it won't change. We will have to go out and, once we finish our working drawings, and have it bid out, and we'll see where we stand there. But right now, we feel pretty strongly that we can get this design done.
Okay.
Mr. Mazzini?
The thing that strikes me most starkly, I guess, is the fact that the C Street side appears to be a 4-story building, and the B Street side appears to be a 5-story building. And I don't think there are any buildings in the historic district that are over 3 stories. Has that been brought up in any of the conversations you've had with the community?
The first answer to your first question, the implicit in your statement is yes, that's correct. 5-story and 4-story. Your observation is correct. Has it been brought up? Yes, it has. It's been discussed. And one of the challenges with this site, as with all sites and all developments, is trying to get the appropriate amount of density to support the land price and the construction costs. Lastly, and perhaps not lastly, but a big goal is trying to get as many folks downtown off of Main Street as possible to energize the neighborhood. So balancing all those competing interests, this is where we stand, and we have really given that, what you mentioned, a lot of thought. I mean, you don't want to have a site that's too dense on one hand. On the other hand, you want to make sure you got a project that works, and that's a very tough balancing act.
Yeah, I think as a historic commission, we have an opportunity to take that piece of property and put something there that would be a 100-year building. And that's, as a commission, I think that's what we're looking for, to build something that's going to be there, past our generation and beyond, and is going to withstand the test of time, and the brick is good, and you referenced the Revere building with the brick on that. I have some of the questions about, the siding. What is that going to be?
That presently hardy plank.
Uh-huh. And the railings and things like that. Is this going to be a 100-year building that you're proposing?
Well, with respect to hardy plank, I don't know the last time you went to a builder's conference, but most of that hardy plank will be along long after probably were all gone. And I agree with you. We want to build a quality project that withstands the test of time. And a lot of that's going to be a function of how well it's maintained, like any building. But, you know, I couldn't stand here with a straight face and tell you that this building in 100 years is going to be looking fantastic. You wouldn't believe it for a moment. But I think it has a definite chance of doing that, especially if it's well maintained.
Okay.
I see here that you have 160 parking spaces total, including street parking?
Correct.
Okay.
It should be on that data should be on the site plan if that's
Right, right. It's in the summary there.
Okay.
Now, so that's including the, what is it, 142 total units?
Correct, 142, that's correct.
And you also said you were hoping to bring in other people to come into the shopping, into the shops there, and are you thinking that parking is just for the people that are living in this area and working here?
The short answer is primarily yes, but we had this conversation today, actually. You know, during the day, I don't think we are not adverse to people that don't live there parking in there to access the neighborhood amenities. Not a problem. As you know, not everyone's going to ride the train, so there are going to be stalls available for people to come in, and the challenge for us is going to be how do we police that parking so that the residents, when they come home, have a place to park, and that the neighborhood, to the extent that they need to use the parking, can use it. Because sort of off-peak parking times, there should be a fair number of stalls in there for the neighborhood use.
Yeah, I think one of the concerns about Main Street has been providing adequate parking space so that we can generate foot traffic easily. People have a place to go so they can park their vehicle and walk up and down the street. I don't know, I just, and in that area, I also would have a concern about sort of a rush hour situation, but I guess it would only be for a limited time. But I see parking as something that would be impactful in several ways. If you have 142 total units, it looks like from the size of the units, you could easily have close to 200 cars just in those units. I don't know, because it seems like if you just have couples, that everybody has a car. Each couple would have 2 cars.
Well, two things. The size of the units, the square footage of these units, they're going to be highly efficient, smaller units. But you raise a good point, and that is an unanswerable, and anyone tells you that it is answerable probably doesn't understand human behavior, and that is how many people are going to bring cars to a particular unit, right? I mean, I'm from San Francisco, and until very recently, I lived in North Beach, which is an incredibly impacted neighborhood. Now, in San Francisco, the planning commissions there have decided that when somebody comes along to do a new project, you're going to find this hard to believe, they're going to limit the number of parking stalls that developer can put into the project to discourage people from having cars. Now, I'll just leave you with that to think that one through. I'm not sure that adds up because, again, you get to human behavior. But the whole push behind this is to get people here to sort of, get in their units, be less reliant on cars, and get out on the street, walk to do your shopping, walk down to the train station to get to the office and that sort of thing. What happens in practical effect? You all have lived here your entire lives. You know better than I. One of the questions that I raised in the beginning is, I said, I'm from San Francisco. I would walk to the train station. Would people here walk to the train station? Everyone said that they would. I would.
I agree. I mean, I used to do that myself for 10 years, so absolutely.
But I've seen people drive half a block to the supermarket, but I shouldn't say, I shouldn't say anything.
That's okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, I mean, does this, you're familiar with the Snyder House across the parking lot from the existing building?
Yes.
Where does that fit into this plan, if anywhere?
Well, I mean, ideally, we would have probably liked to someday incorporate it into the development, but I think that the amount of money that they want for that land is far exceeds the value to the project, and that's the rub.
Now, is it next to that you were talking about, Mr. Brendel, where they're going to put this amphitheater?
It's actually northeast of the unit. We call it the King House because that's the people that currently own it live in Florida. That's directly north, and then the amphitheater would be northeast because the King lot only goes across about halfway in the block between B and C. So it leaves this other area where the amphitheater would be located in.
So above the old mill?
No.
I'm actually at B.
More towards B
The
Street, right?
amphitheater's right at B, right.
Near the swimming pool?
No, here. Here's B Street.
Yeah, here's the swimming pool.
Where you see these contours, thank you. Where you see the contours over here, it may wind up being on public land, not necessarily their land. Thank you, Lisa. Madam Chair, can I also comment another thing? I'm speaking from personal experience, and we've had many discussions with them about this, and I lived at Patuxent Place for at least 2 different times, and there is a utility that develops in mixed use. Now, there's not as much mixed use in this project, but my space was used innumerable times during the day because I was gone, and we have had people lie to us and tell us that, 50% of the people that live in this building are going to ride the train, therefore they'll leave their cars there. Well, they're not going to, because we don't have metro-level service of subway. We have MARC service of the subways. So we're estimating that maybe 10%, if we're lucky, would use this. So it means a lot of people are leaving the spaces during the day, leaving them open. And as Mr. Mullen said, the difficulty of having any kind of evening entertainment is chances are a lot of those folks are going to come back. And that's the thing we have to kind of like jostle for that as well. The other thing is you see that there's 2 carriageways in the parking is not, this is not a strip center, the carriageways. So we're going to be we're working with them very carefully because where I'm coming from is I like to put a lot of bollard lighting inside there so it's not obtrusive, but it's also, obviously public safety is a major consideration. This and everything else that we do goes to the Emergency Services Commission. So lighting will definitely be an issue. Sorry for jump in.
Yes.
Mr. Brundle, since you brought up, we've been talking about parking. Parking is not our bailiwick, but just as a piece of information, in an ordinary apartment environment, what is the regular zoning?
It depends on the bedrooms,
Okay.
but again,
Give
the
us
one.
a hint.
Pardon?
Does 160 parking spaces, or in this case, 140, whatever, what is it?
150.
150 parking spaces on the premises comply with the guidelines that you have now?
Not if this were a typical garden apartment complex, but we're transitioning in an area where, like it or not, Laurel's becoming more urban, and people don't make those choices. These units, if these were 3-bedroom units, we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation, but they're not 3-bedroom units. Most of them aren't even 2. These are meant for singles and maybe couples, and chances of them having more than one car, in my opinion, are slim. And that's an opinion, But again, living at Patuxent Place, we've had a very good example of how spaces are utilized. And Patuxent Place actually has a gross excess of parking in how they're processed. But again, there's a lot more commercial uses at Patuxent Place.
Gross excess at Patuxent?
Absolutely. The place is the whole area in the back is never utilized.
Yeah, I've seen it utilized quite a bit, but you lived there.
I lived there twice.
I know
so.
you did.
No, there may be occasions when there may be occasions, but generally as a rule, it just kind of, and that is not conducive it's conducive towards people hanging around, which is, we do like to avoid that.
Has the city done any studies as far as the traffic impact, especially on C Street?
Yes.
And
But again, we gauge everything on adequate levels of service, A through F, and the study went all the way down from Route 1 to 7th Street, and the effect was negligible. Again, we're very concerned about everything else because we've discussed bump outs, for example, to put plazas around B and C Street, but one of the first obstacles we ran into was for public safety reasons, that if you do that and give people a little bit more sight distance, which is it's a huge issue, public safety vehicles cannot quickly access these side streets, and so we had to abandon that. But trust me, I'm right up there with everybody else, making a left on B, A, B, C, Avondale, Post Office, you name it. It's an issue, but whenever you take away a parking space for visibility, you reduce the space on the street. So it's a back and forth kind of thing. But the city routinely, just to go back very quickly, I don't want to go off in tangents, even with bigger complexes like in back of the mall, the Archstone development, we look very carefully at how parking was utilized in spaces, but they gave us instances of other places where, how many people really use this. And in Archstone, I won't mention that Robert lives there, but they don't have a parking problem there, and their spaces, they were also reduced by the city as well. Because they kind of know what they need, because if they don't provide parking, they're the people that are in trouble. But I mean, I do hope for a little crowding, because a lot of these back streets have been destitute.
Well, you say they're in trouble, but really it's going to be the surrounding citizens and property owners that are going to be in trouble, because the overflow is going to go wherever a parking space is open.
I think there'll come a time that we need to have a discussion about public parking facilities in the Main Street area. We've talked about it for years, because we have lots of interested parties in some of the vacant space on Main Street. Yeah. And then obviously you know very well that there's a rather large complex planned at the train station as well. Mm-hmm. That's bigger than this one.
Yeah. And we suffer that on a daily basis when the train station parking area fills up. They park wherever they can find a space. Mm-hmm. So it's a major
luckily
problem.
The dynamic will shift there, because the commuter parking there, again, and keep my tangent down, the commuter parking there will be shifted to Lafayette Avenue. There'll be a multi-level parking garage built next to Danneman's Auto Repair. Yeah. Only people that work and live in it. So that'll be a help, but parking will always, as Mark said, it's always going to be some form of an issue.
Yeah. I see parking as an issue, and C Street is very crowded, especially at Main Street. It's almost a traffic jam at times, and not just in the morning or in the evening, but during the day as well.
Right, and that's testament to the success of Mr. Miles Meat Market, sure, absolutely.
Right. Yep.
Right. There's not a lot of going further down the street.
What, B Street?
C Street, it's not crowded going all the way down. It's only crowded in the first 2 blocks to get to Miles.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, but that would be an added problem. You're taking all this traffic, and if there's not a plan, that's already a tight street. There's parking on both sides of the street already, and to add this much this size project to that, I'm not saying a street light, but something I would think would have to be done or addressed at some point with this size project going in. It's something to think about.
No, and that's why we're here. We want to hear your concerns, even though, as you know, this isn't, that party's in front of you.
Right.
That's the reason. I mean, I recommended that they come here tonight so we can hear
Mm-hmm.
concerns, and we will take them forward to the Planning Commission and to the Emergency Services Commission. The issue of parking is not going to go away.
Well, I guess I'm going further than parking. I'm going access as well. And like you said, you can't do the bump outs because that cuts down on emergency access, but something should be addressed to that, because it's already an issue. It's C and Main for sure, but I can see that overflowing to B as well. But that would be my issue, it'd be something to think about that, and the appearance of the building would be my 2 main concerns.
Do you have a specific concern about the appearance being, like the brick or the architecture?
No, I do like the brick. I think that's great. I'm not normally opposed to hardy plank, but I would maybe add some more brick in some of those areas would,
But there is something besides just hardy plank. Is that at the top a different detail? It's more of a fish.
Oh,
scale.
correct, yes, I didn't mention that
Not
there.
all hardy plank, the whole front.
Correct. There's a sort of a fish scale treatment at the top roof line that it's not shown because it's very difficult to show at this scale.
yeah.
And does that include the top level? Does it go down to the top level of the top floor? It's the way that it's presented in the,
It appears that it does, yeah.
and it is.
I had a question about what type of units you were going to use for heating and air conditioning. Were they going to be rooftop units or individual units per unit, or how? that
Well,
was gonna be
it's interesting. We are taking a hard look at that. One of the things that we're looking at is Mitsubishi has come out with a new wall type of unit that apparently you don't need the type of reducting and return lines that you normally. I'm not an HVAC person, but we have a guy who runs our entire capital improvements division, and he suggested that we use it, and our mechanical engineers are looking at that because they're extremely efficient, and we would, while the units themselves would be more costly, we would make up for the cost in the lack of ducting work that we would have to do. So that's an open question, but we want to try and get at the absolute best system that we can come up with, especially in these smaller units where you got to make sure that things cycle.
Because my thinking there was, how would that change the visual aesthetics of the side of the building if you had units in the side, or if you had units that were going to be up on the roof? How would you be able to shield that from street vision? And then, in addition, with that many units, I'm sure these days the units are a lot quieter than they used to be. But if you got all the units running on the side of the building at the same time.
Again, I'm
they're just concerned about the volume of what the noise would be, and if somebody has been addressing that, and if that's something that has been.
I can dig into that further. For me to go deep into HVAC is kind of dangerous territory, but I know that they're serviced from the roof, and that one of the questions that I raised was we didn't want to destroy the aesthetic of the exterior with the very issue that you touched on. So we would want to know that if there was any penetration, that it was adequately screened so that it looked good, because I don't think that looks very good when you have units all over the place. So that is a work in progress.
Okay.
Going back to the building for a minute, just from what I can see from the site plan, is there a blade of grass anywhere?
In the interior?
Interior, exterior, top, bottom, anywhere?
Well, if you look at your site plan, which was the third page of what we handed out to you, in the parking islands, we'll have mature trees and grass, and granted, it's not much, but we have a lot of surface parking. I mean, that's yet another trade-off. And then you're going to have grass around, it's not shown, but around the club, what's denoted as the clubhouse and the pool, off to one side there.
Exterior of the building, there's no grass.
That's correct. We're a zero, it's nearly a zero lot line situation because of the constraints of the site.
Are there not setbacks, like in residential areas, like where I live and where most people in town live? Are there not setbacks required?
Not a house setback.
Not a house setback.
No, it would not be the same as a building restriction line, which is what you have on
Yeah.
a single-family home. This is multifamily, and because of that, it varies. We haven't gotten quite to that level of detail yet, which we'll get to at the time of detailed site plan, but those, you know your planning commission. I guarantee you, knowing the planning commission and the council, that those very issues are going to be brought up by them, and that is some of the green areas, et cetera. But again, one of the things that has been talked about with this project has been the fact that we're looking for an urban project because we're really talking about the downtown area of the city of Laurel. It is not the mall, but it still is the downtown area, what historically has been the downtown of the city of Laurel. The other thing is that we hope, I know that from the city side, one of the discussions we've had is the orientation of this project to the park. And the use of the amphitheater down there and the use of the park as some of the green space for the residents here, because that park is, if anything, underutilized. It's not, it truly is underutilized. And so we're hopeful that this will better utilize our park that's down there, which is a very pretty park, but it's not used as much as it should be. And we're hopeful that having more people down there will invigorate the entire neighborhood and hopefully try to start a redevelopment of our entire Main Street area, which will bring back the viability that Main Street had when I was a kid. Now, I grew up in Four Corners, but I used to come out to Laurel. And I remember when Laurel's Main Street, and I'm probably as old, if not older, than most anybody up there. I remember when Laurel's Main Street was very vibrant back when I was a kid. So, you know, I think that's the hope of the administration, and that is that this will be the first step in bringing back the vibrancy to Main Street and to allow the businesses there to flourish and to start having more of what we call a 24-hour people walking, you know, in the evenings, and not, you know, the old roll up the sidewalk at 8 o'clock, but having people that are out there and utilizing the businesses into the evening, making it more conducive for people to come to downtown and feel comfortable walking, having people who live there and walk, as we are lucky to do with some of the other projects along Main Street. But again, this is just the first step in what we hope to be a number of steps to try to revitalize that area.
I'm sure with the build-outs, you'd be continuing with the planters like we have on Main Street with
Oh, yeah.
concrete planters and plants and trees and those, in addition to the tables and chairs.
Correct. And one of the concepts that Carl and I were talking about, we have this in San Francisco. They're called parklets. And I would encourage you to go on and just Google San Francisco Planning Department. They have a really wonderful slideshow of what these things look like. And our thinking is certainly along C Street, putting in, you know, one, if not two of these parklets, which are, you know, sort of miniature parks with benches around and some greenery that are inviting to people. Here, this would be just in front of your awning area and your elevation that folks want to come to, they want to stay and hang out and socialize and energize the street. And they work. I mean, they really do work. You know, as I was listening to Bob talk about re-energizing and the urban nature of things. You know, I lived in this neighborhood where there were no setbacks. I mean, all the buildings came right to the sidewalk, but a half block away was a park, and everyone in the neighborhood congregated in the park almost on a nightly basis, and it was really neat. You got to really know your neighbors, and people really did use that amenity. So it does work. I know it probably may strike you as stark when you're thinking about how your own houses are set back and that kind of soft treatment, but you know, if we can soften that up with some planter boxes and so on and figure out a way to do that, we will do that. And I would encourage you to look at the parklet concept. It's a pretty neat thing, and it's working.
Going back to the height of the buildings, do you know what the height, the elevation of the roof line is on B Street compared to Revere Bank?
I don't. I'll
think
find
it's
out,
higher?
but I don't.
Do you think it's higher?
My suspicion is that it's probably equal to, if not slightly higher.
Because it is on a lower elevation there than Main Street.
That is correct. There is a downward slope, that's
A
correct.
downward slope there.
But on an absolute basis, in terms of height from top to bottom, I could find that out. But in terms of a perspective, if you were standing on Main Street, it's definitely going to be lower because of the downhill nature of it. I mean, it's not a huge downhill, but that's the way it goes.
The river stone, you can't really tell how high up it comes from the ground, but how high up does it come from the ground on the building?
I couldn't say specifically. I would guess maybe 3 feet. I mean, that's something we'll have to flesh out. Again, you're looking at a conceptual design, so.
So it could, yeah, there could be changes.
Correct. I mean, not huge, but there could be changes.
It's come a long way from the first drawings that I saw.
That's correct. If you see the stacks of drawings that we have,
Your first one was very California.
yeah, and very urban. I mean, I almost should have brought that just to show you how far we've come from that to this.
I mean, it's a nice looking building. There's probably a few things that I personally would change, but overall, it's a nice looking building. But one of my concerns is that it looks nice in 20 years or 40 years.
A legitimate concern. I mean, we plan to build with good materials, and again, it's maintenance and.
Carl, you may or may not know, are there any plans with the other lots that are adjacent to this project? We already talked about 12C, but going back towards Main Street, you got Krupp's, and then you've got a parking lot, Miles's parking lot, and then you've got the other hotel there on B Street.
Yeah. We would love for this project to extend. I mean, there have been conversations, and again, this is real estate matters, but Mrs. Krupp has been shown interest in. They've spoken with her. Mr. St. Paul, who owns the town lodge, I certainly wouldn't mind, but that's up to you. In an overlay, if that went away, that obviously casts a different pallor on the street at night. But that's the only thing we know of to date that are on the vacant lots directly adjacent to this. The problem with the King House or the Snyder Apartments is that it is in floodplain, and if you tear it down, you're subject to you could never recover from it because the Maryland Department of the Environment would restrict you so much, nothing could ever be done. So that's where we're actually hoping for that to be revitalized and changed into, I think it would make an ideal bed and breakfast or make an ideal artist residence studio. And we do have someone looking for it that's interested in a school for training artists, a gallery, and art instruction lessons and stuff like that. So I think it's best left alone, personally.
The house that's
Correct.
there now. Yeah, it looks like the floodplain is just on the edge of that property.
Yeah.
But if you tore the house down, that would be the whole piece of property would be subjected?
Well, not necessarily, but it depends. I don't want to go into, and Mr. Fleming's better versed at this. I mean, floodplains, it depends who you cite. There's somebody that said, well, there's going to be one coming and it's going to cover everything up to Main Street, and there's all different kinds. So that's my recommendation for that property is it's best left untouched.
Yeah, I mean, just to the extent that you want to look at that, there are two floodplain lines there. One is, you can barely see it. It's to the far left of to the far right of your, next to the data, the summary data. Mm-hmm. You'll see it appears to say FEMA dated such and such. That's the existing floodplain line. What the darker line that's closer to our project is the new proposed line, and we intentionally built inside of that. Or plan to build inside of that, because obviously we don't want to trigger that kind of scrutiny. I mean, that would be very difficult.
You're talking about the dark line that skips along the edge of the pool.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Just as close as we could get to it. That's probably more detail than you want to hear, but.
Madam Chair.
Yes, please.
I'd like to commend you on using materials like the river stone and the brick to reflect the architecture of Laurel. In tweaking this as you go forward, in order to possibly minimize the volume, I would encourage your architects to maybe look at the outside corners, just like you mentioned on the sign, and taking that rectangle and kind of tweaking the corners there to give it a fancier appearance. There's always the possibility of just tweaking the outside corners of the building so that it doesn't read as a full square box, maybe just the corner edges. I'm not saying do a mansard roof, just when you're looking at it, maybe the architects would consider those corners and whether just taking off little parts of that corners would diminish the volume. I think the question about whether the HVAC would be up on the roof is a very good one to consider, as opposed to trying to put it down on the ground. And one question that I had in reference to that is, are you planning to include any green features? And I don't necessarily mean grass. I mean things like literally a green roof, recycling rainwater roof. Are you doing anything with downspouts? Are you doing environmentally friendly things?
Let me jump in there. The city has a standard package of green technology uses, other than site plan uses that are required. What we don't do deliberately, the mayor and city council felt very strongly about this, is we do not require LEED certification, because LEED certification adds hundreds of thousands of dollars to buildings and makes them unfeasible. But we do, the chief building official is allowed to make an equivalency determination using similar green globes or Energy Star certification, so there is a comparable.
Okay. I'm just wondering whether you're thinking about that now, so that when you go to the next iteration of design, those features would show, in other words, you've given us this 3D, if it's going to have a green roof, would that be there? Or if you're going to have...
The answer is yes, we've thought hard about it, and our submission to the stormwater management people is necessarily going to have to incorporate some of that stuff. And we've talked about a green roof. I'm not sure we're going to go that way, but the interior is certainly going to have what we call green treatment in order to deal with the stormwater management issues. So absolutely, do we think about it? Yes. And are we working on it? Yes. And so we're preparing our submission.
Okay. That's it.
The only thing I have to say about the scale of the building is that it's similar to what the mills were. Our mill buildings that everybody is talking about were massive industrial buildings that caught your eye on the street. And I think this can attract attention down to that side of the street. And I don't think the scale would be overwhelming height-wise when you're looking down on Main Street to where it would stand out like the Empire State Building. It's just my opinion.
Sorry, no, go ahead.
I did think of one other question. Will the ends of any of the buildings have fenestration, windows and doors on them? Because they appear, what I'm seeing here, to be blank. If you're going to reference something like a mill uses natural daylight, and so they maximize their windows all the way around. I understand that coming up to zero lot lines or close to it, you may not have the ability to have fenestration on a lot line, but on any place that's not right on the lot line, it's set back, is there going to be fenestration there to help break up the volume of that wall, especially on, for instance, the riverside, where you're not going to have that issue of butting up against another building in the future?
The answer is absolutely yes, and we are very sensitive to the beauty of the view corridor and the river, and for us, it's all about, besides a quality product, they go hand in hand, leasability. And people are going to want to lease a unit and stay in a unit that has a window view of the river. I mean, that's just very pretty. And for example, on the site plan, if you look at what's denoted as the clubhouse, there are units above that. And those units, I know specifically because I was involved in that discussion, are going to have windows on the side, not only on the side facing the pool, but on the side facing the river, so that the folks that are in those units can really enjoy that amenity. And the other aspect about the site plan, although it probably looks stark looking down on it, we were trying to enhance view corridors. And when we first sat down with the mayor about 2 years ago, he had his own vision of what the site plan should look like, and we must have gone through half a dozen site plans only to ultimately come back to ultimately what lays out to his vision, which was trying to enhance those view corridors. And so that's a goal. So the short answer is yes, whenever we can have a window, we're going to have one, because that's a really nice amenity.
Any other questions?
I guess one more follow-up to that, sorry. When you're tweaking with your architect, if you cannot have windows on the elevations, like facing I guess it would be the southwest side, facing closest to Main Street, can you look at ways to break up the volume of the building on that side so it's not a big blank wall, like you'd want to project a movie on that big blank wall?
Certainly, that's a great,
To help
that's a
break up the
very,
volume.
very good point. Okay, well, thank you all. It's a pleasure talking with you, and we look forward to having a really positive project and moving forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you so
Thank
much. Agenda. Agenda item 9 is a presentation of the proposed sign regulation changes. Is everybody going over that? Is anybody going to be going over that with us? Or present as Mr. Manzi going over the new ordinance with us, or Marty? Or you, Carl? No.
Not signs. I guess it falls to me
That
by
falls to
default.
you, yes.
So, what you have in front of you really is a minor, really some minor changes to our sign ordinance. And what it does is it kind of differentiates what our temporary signs are. It defines a temporary sign. It defines how long a temporary sign can be put up. It takes out real estate signs. It exempts them specifically so that we have that in there. It's always been that way, but we haven't had it in the law. We've talked about window signs, and we changed the window signs around a little bit, but it's really just renumbering. Probably the biggest change is the fact that we have taken out the size of signs, meaning size of lettering and symbols. And the other thing is that we have put in there that flat wall signs are permitted at a ratio of 1 square foot for every lineal foot of building frontage, and we've removed the section with regard to the Historic District Commission as regards the size of the sign. It doesn't take away any of your power under 66B, because your power under 66B deals with where the sign is placed, the material of the sign, the color of the sign, and things of that nature. That's still there. But basically what we're running into, and what we have run into, is we've got two competing interests here. We have the zoning ordinance, which really talks about and does control the number of signs and the size of the sign. And that's appropriate in the zoning ordinance, okay? The second thing we run into is what's on the sign, and we run squarely into the First Amendment there. And that's one of the things that I had a concern about with regard to our ordinance, and that is I didn't think our ordinance complied with the First Amendment requirements, because we cannot tell people what they can put on a sign. We can control the size of the letters, and that will be something that we want to deal with at a later time, and we will want your input into that when we talk about a maximum size of letters, because that's what we'll talk about. We won't talk about a minimum size, but we'll talk about a maximum size of letters. But we weren't prepared in this ordinance to do that at this time. because I think that does take input, and you guys have had a lot more experience with the signs, especially in the historic district. And we can have two sets of maximum criteria. We can have a maximum criteria within the historic district and a maximum criteria outside the historic district. So I think that will be the next iteration of changing our sign ordinance. But we're trying to bring it up the sign ordinance hasn't been looked at in a long time. We're just trying to bring it up to current standards, and also to recognize the fact that under case law in the past 5 years, there's been a significant change in the raising of commercial speech to almost the same level as free speech, non-commercial free speech. And that's been through several Supreme Court cases that have basically told us we can't keep these newspaper vending boxes from going wherever they want to go, and the apartment guides, and what's the other one? I guess it's jobs, the employment things. They basically have been raised to a level of speech under the First Amendment that's protected. And that's why we have to, and we did just recently, a number of years ago, enter into a voluntary agreement with the local newspapers and the vendors with regard to where these would be put. But there was no way that we could file legislation or create legislation that would not be challenged under the First Amendment. And there are cases, I can tell you, there are cases on both sides, and they are all over the place as far as the First Amendment and newspaper vending boxes and things of that nature. But it is pretty clear that the one thing that has happened since 1970, when I got first admitted to the bar, till now, is that in 1970, commercial speech was treated differently than what would be your normal speech. And normal speech to me is someone standing up on a street corner doing either political or whatever, saying whatever they want. They have raised commercial speech to that same level. The Supreme Court has, so that's why we made the change that we did in this ordinance. But it makes a clear delineation that the zoning ordinance is a thing that talks about size. It talks about the number of signs. But the Historic District Commission within the Historic District has total control over where the sign's placed, what material the sign is, and color. And those would be the things that, in my experience, the times I've been here, those have been the things that I think have been the most critical to the commission. So I don't think that we're really changing anything.
But we couldn't limit the number of words or...
They can put whatever they want within that. Now, you can limit the number, well, the zoning ordinance would limit the number of words unless it's within a square.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Because we would consider the entire square or rectangle as being the sign. So whatever the area of that rectangle is, the only time the size of the letters or number of letters would come in would be if they are letters put directly on a building and they're not part of an overall signboard.
Mm-hmm.
Then, yes, absolutely, we would.
Okay.
Mr. Mason?
I'm going to go, I'd like to ask a question with respect to the First Amendment first. Is profanity, I mean, can you stand on a street corner?
You can stand on a street corner and do that.
Shout profanities?
Yes.
And you can have it painted on your car?
Yes.
Okay. That's off the subject. My point is, when I was fresh on the commission, we had in our guidelines with respect to window signs.
Yes.
That it couldn't take up more than 20% of a window.
Mm-hmm.
We, on a crash basis, the mayor insisted we come in and we revise our guidelines, and I specifically remember, because I was very happy about it, that with respect to temporary signs, that was taken off our plate, and that was fine. I did not recall that the 20% limit was taken out at that same time.
I don't think it was.
Well, it's not in there today. Okay?
Okay, well, I don't know. That, I don't remember that. I remember I think the longest discussion we had was window signs and what amounts to a window sign and how far inside the window
I thought that came a little later.
you have to go. But I thought that was part of the guidelines that we had the same discussion, and I thought that was the longest discussion we had, because I think we spent the better part of an evening speaking about that. And then the question was, visible from the street
Right.
and not visible from the street. And I think we came to a kind of a meeting of the minds that we would say 3 feet from any window would be a window sign.
Well, I think,
Anything
I
beyond
think
that.
66B, maybe you can
Yeah,
elaborate.
66B doesn't really speak to
I
that.
think it does it not?
I can't answer.
I think
It
maybe
really
it
doesn't
does.
speak to signs.
Pardon?
It really does. It says visible.
Window signs.
Yeah.
Yes, I believe it does. I mean.
Well,
I
we're
know
not doing anything to keep.
No, I know you're not changing that.
66B.
I would like the lobby to get our 20% coverage of a window back in. That's
I'll certainly carry that to the mayor.
excellent.
Thank you. I personally don't have any problem one way or the other with that, so.
Okay.
And I understand where you're coming from. So
Yeah.
I'll be happy to. This though doesn't deal, this piece of legislation you have in front of you
does
doesn't
not.
deal with that.
That's correct. The only thing it does, it
different,
takes,
yeah. These are some minor changes.
it takes away
so.
from us the
Right.
3-inch lettering.
Right, and what we're going to do is we truly are going to come back and talk about that, because Carl and I have had this discussion, and that is, what is or is not an appropriate size for a maximum size of lettering. And I think that's a better way to handle it than to provide that you've got to use this level. Provide a maximum level and then let them do whatever they want with their signs, whether they want the numbers larger and the letters smaller, because we're not going to allow them any larger sign without coming to either this commission or the planning commission. They're not allowed they'd have to come through for a sign waiver in order to get a larger sign. So what we wanted to do, the intent of this was to clearly delineate what's in the zoning ordinance from what is not, and what the zoning ordinance covers, so that there is no overlap or thought that there is an overlap between the two jurisdictions. But it's not meant to limit in any way what the Historic District Commission does, because it's making clear what the powers of the Historic District Commission are. And I think that's important.
And then the other item is on the sentence that talks about flat wall or projecting signs, and where you're deleting, talking about 1 square foot for every linear foot of frontage, and then it had, this figure is subject to review and approval of the city's Historic District Commission based on compliance with its guidelines and powers as stated in Article 66. To the extent that we have such powers, I would.
It's not amending your powers at all. That's just, it's not necessary to be in there. If you have the power under 66B, you have the power under 66B.
And so why is it being taken out?
Just because it seems to, it's not necessary to be in here. That's why.
There are probably a lot of things in here that aren't necessary, but they're advantageous to, not that they're required, but is there a good, what's the good reason to take it out?
The only reason I did was the fact that it's already in the law. Why reference a law that could change, and then we'd have to change the zoning ordinance? To me, whatever powers the Historic District Commission has pursuant to 66B, this can't change it.
I understand that.
Okay. So that was my thought. It's only really a clerical change. It's not really, there's no intent behind it other than to just say, look, well, why are we referencing another law when this is the zoning ordinance? what we're
Because
trying to
most-
do.
Because most of the sign ordinances are now in the statutes, in the zoning statutes.
Yes,
Whereas
zoning
this just
ordinances.
puts- And this sentence just puts the public, makes the public aware that there may be other things that guide signage. That's all I'm saying. And I think it would be healthy to leave it in.
I'll carry, we can certainly make the council aware of that.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Anybody else? Thank you for going over that
Sure.
with us. Okay, onward. We have a number of staff approvals. Does anybody have any questions about them or comments about them?
I had two items. One is just a observation. I guess requesting in HDC 004-2013, requesting approval to replace wood decking with Trex in kind. Trex really isn't in kind with wood. So that could have been some discussion on that, but I'm not going to take it any further myself. But the very last item, I'm in a little confusion. Requesting approval to remove a maple trees M. It seemed like the print ran out or something. I'm not quite sure, unless it's just on my copy.
No, it's here
Well,
too.
that's in all of them.
Just kind of wondering what the sentence was intended on saying.
It's a secret.
I didn't hear what he
It's a
said.
secret.
Remove a maple tree on Stanley Place. That sounds familiar.
Actually,
Which number is it?
And
Just-
actually,
very
it's the
last
very
one.
last one.
Very
It
last
doesn't
sentence.
have a, it
Doesn't
only
even
has
have
a
a year or two.
3-digit.
11.
Yeah.
Oh, I have to
Presume
turn
it's
my, have to
2013.
turn my page, I think. Oh, I didn't finish it, did I? She's another one that has maple trees that are losing limbs and diseased, and it seems to be a time period of losing trees over the city. I've had about 8, 9, 10 requests for trees come in. I have a couple for our next meeting.
I'll go back to the issue that was raised with respect to using Trex. I read that and it caught my eye, and obviously Trex is not in kind for wood, but I think that maybe we ought to, for the next meeting, propose either a guide, and I don't think it's in our guidelines, but in our rules of procedure or something, to allow staff, especially now that we're only generally meeting once a month.
At one of our meetings for decking, I was told that we could use that as an in-kind item because
Yeah.
it's a wood composite.
Well, it's not wood, it's not in kind, but I don't have any problem delegating to
approval.
staff to approve a fabric that we generally, that we've
So just
never turned
in-kind would
down.
be wood to wood, and this is Trex to wood, acceptable, but not in-kind.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
If they had Trex and they were replacing it with Trex, that
yeah.
would be in kind.
On the tree across the street from, the big tree across the street from me, I think that's in here. I read it a long time ago, but Riverview Court,
Ash tree.
yeah. You did in fact have a real arborist as opposed to just a tree person. A licensed arborist.
The reports that are coming in, I don't know, it's tree experts, license numbers on them.
Okay, arborists in the state of Maryland, arborists must be licensed as opposed to a tree expert, okay?
Right, like a Binky's or a whatever, you have to have a
Well,
true arborist with a license
I mean,
number.
you know, the
Adirondack Tree Service.
Adirondacks has a single arborist, okay? There are very few arborists in the state. It's like a 2-year course or something. I mean, it's a rigorous license to get.
Now, let me ask you, if it's an obvious, I usually ask them to take a picture of the tree for me.
And if it's an obvious dead tree?
Oh, yeah, obvious dead tree, doesn't,
Okay.
probably doesn't, but this particular tree was a pretty darn big tree, and about half of it looked dead. The other half looked pretty darn good. I didn't go, by the time I got to it, it was too late. But when I saw them cutting down the dead part of the tree, I didn't have any problem. And then I was surprised to see what looked like the healthy part of the tree came down. So, anyway, my point in mentioning it is that please, in the future, make sure, if they claim to have an arborist give you an opinion, make sure it is from an arborist, somebody with a license. And you can go online and you can look and see who the arborists are in the state of Maryland. Went through a huge battle on this, after the big storms, became a big issue in my personal life. And we had a guy from Adirondacks come and talk to us about one of our trees that we're a little bit afraid of, but there is a machine. The guy told us there's a machine. There have been lots of trees, downed trees during storms, where the tree looks perfectly healthy and it falls and it's 80% hollow inside.
Right.
And so we said, looking at the tree and deciding if the tree is probably in good shape or not good shape, well, what does the inside look like? And the guy said, he said the only way you can find out is by a machine that's kind of like an X-ray machine.
Density meter, I've seen it used.
$5,000?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
$5,000.
Yep. So they don't even have one.
The cost to use it or the price
No,
of the
the price
machine?
of the machine is $5,000, and
What's the fee?
they don't have one, so they don't have a fee.
Now, when I decided to pay $1,800 to have mine taken down, they ran a stick about this big around through the middle and all the way down to the ground inside the tree. I said, I think it's hollow, because I watched them do it. For like no dollars. I could tell mine was hollow, and I had it taken down.
So add to the agenda of the next meeting an amendment to I think it's probably in our rules of procedure, to allow you to approve stuff that we have regularly approved that is not in kind, something like Trex. I don't know that we can think of another good example, but that's certainly one that I don't have, other people haven't spoken, but I don't have any problem with that.
Party board.
Yeah. So that you or your successor aren't out on a limb.
Was 202 Stanley, were they going to plant a tree to replace?
I make that a condition on all of the certificate of approvals, that you're required to plant a tree, and the place doesn't have to be in the same spot, but you do need to plant a tree.
Well,
Very good.
Replacement species needs to be approved by this body.
I
I have
thought
a
we had
list
a
of
list.
of acceptable ones.
We do have a list of acceptable trees.
List is pretty long. It pretty much
It
covers.
doesn't necessarily have to be a maple tree that she puts
No.
back.
Right,
No.
just an acceptable tree.
Any new business?
When are we going to hear about Main Street?
What part?
The 100 block.
We're waiting a traffic study. It could be as early as November.
Very good.
This is the state of Maryland at work, and they're very quickly.
Mhm.
Maryland Department of Transportation.
Does it move?
Yeah, I think they first came to us, 5 or 6 years ago?
Things like that anyway.
Is it the same people?
Yes.
Really?
Well, the very first one to come up, I don't know if you ever had a presentation, I remember the pictures you presented to you. It was Kareem Abdus-Salam.
Right.
But I'm not sure if you ever presented it to you. But no, this is still Patriot right now. But we never anticipated going on those. There's been a bigger project, Hawthorne Place, that the Birdway Express Terminal, which we already got ready. great sign for this. Photograph of the entrance sign for the state of Missouri, show me state. We kind of gave up on their progress. Well, the state's now kind of irritated. They want to move the state along. And of course, they were caught in the recession like everybody else, but none of the thaws here, people seem to be moving slightly moving forward. And obviously, every day I go by down Route 1 just so I can see the deck missing.
Yes.
The biggest gift of all.
Yep, that is a great thing.
Am I correct at the groundbreaking that they said that they were going to leave the, I don't remember seeing it on the concept drawings, but did they say they were going to leave the back deck?
They're still undecided.
Yeah, that's what I
Going
thought.
back and forth because they're doing studies on it. If I had my druthers, I'd say they probably won't bring it down. Because, again, it depends what it's a cost-benefit analysis like everyone else.
But isn't most of the planned construction one story, except for maybe the movie theater?
Yes, and the parking. There are parking facilities for the residential, but that's not happening right now. This is essentially two places where everything comes down.
Yeah, right.
Except Burlington.
Right. Oh, Burlington doesn't come down.
It doesn't come down until after Christmas.
Oh, okay.
And then right around January 15th it's supposed to.
Oh, it's not that it doesn't come down.
Oh, God, no.
Okay.
Because it's sitting right where the Harris Teeter is supposed to be.
Teeter, yay.
And we're take time deadline to make sure that's happening. Move them across the way, so that's really what's driving it.
But it seemed to me a two-story parking deck behind a one-story shopping strip mall would look rather unusual.
Well, it doesn't, because the topography of 4th Street there, as you remember, like that, we call the Macy's hole and the Hex hole, you know, you had to go down.
Yeah,
So that topo hasn't changed, but how they, like I said, how they plan to do it. We expect them to run for a final plan, hopefully in November, whatever the second Tuesday is. Hopefully. We have a number of things working.
Good deal. There was a lady in the audience that wanted to speak during the presentation. And the rule of order would be, I was going to ask her after we were done with our questions, but she didn't wait long enough to do that, but I didn't know who she was.
She was
Up front talking to him.
Oh, okay,
I guess she's getting the question back.
okay.
She presented.
I felt kind of bad that she, you know.
She came up. She was one of the.
She was one of the presenters? I don't know who she was. Okay. She was one of the applicants.
Right.
Landscaping.
Yes, for 4th Street.
Oh.
She was just curious about the project.
I see.
Because I went back and asked her this. She had questions for us. but
Right.
She was wanting to hear about the project.
Okay, yeah, because she kept raising her hand, and I was like, just, you know, I was trying to say, just a minute, so I felt bad. I hope she didn't leave, I hope she didn't leave angry.
I guess.
Right.
I think it's.
Because I wasn't sure if during presentations that are of a conceptual nature, if we usually take.
If you allow jumping, then everyone jumps in.
I see, yes, I know. Okay, all right. But I felt bad.
Move we adjourn.
Okay. We're adjourned.
Nice to see everybody.
Yeah.
We don't get this treat very often.
Sometimes not.
Oh, it's a treat?
Yeah, Mr. Mann.
Of course it
it's always a
is.